So the last time I covered Dhyan Yoga, and today we
Sorry, you're
begin
on
the
mute.
session on Dhyan Yoga. Dhyan Yoga is the
Ma'am,
essence
if you
of the
unmute
6th
yourself,
chapter of the
please.
Bhagavad Gita.
Voice is coming.
There's some noise in the background. Can you stop that? Turn off the...
Yeah.
So we begin this discussion on the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is essentially Dhyan Yoga. Now the word Yoga comes from the Sanskrit root which means yuj, which is yuj. Yuj means to reunite. To reunite with what? To reunite with God. Similarly, you have in English the word religion. It comes from the root word religare. Religare means again to reunite with God. So both yoga as well as religion have the same meaning, that which reunites with God. The Bhagavad Gita brought about the introduction of various forms of yoga. And in fact, the Bhagavad Gita may be seen as a synthesis of yogas, where Lord Krishna brings about a synthesis of all the Ashtika. Ashtika means those philosophies that believe in God. It brings about an integration of all the Astika philosophies which follow the Vedas. So Astika means those that follow the Vedas, those that believe in God. And all of these philosophies that were extant at that time, that were prevalent at that time, have been included in the Bhagavad Gita and integrated around the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. If you look at it, the Bhagavad Gita, essentially the knowledge that is in the Bhagavad Gita comes under Sankhya. So all this talk of Prakriti, of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, it is not Vedanta, it is actually Sankhya. Further, Krishna clearly states that the Jnana which he speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita is Sankhya philosophy. Lokesmin dvivida nishta, Krishna says, Jnana yogena sankhyanam, karma yogena yoginam. So, Sankhyanam means those who follow Sankhya. And Krishna points out that knowledge is that which is Sankhya. Now, Sankhya philosophy was intimately paired with yoga. And this yoga was Dhyan Yoga. So, Sankhya philosophy was the theory, and Dhyan Yoga was the practice or the yajna that was performed. And hence, it is included here in the Bhagavad Gita as Dhyan Yoga. In this chapter on Dhyan Yoga, Krishna explains, number one, what is the nature of the yogi? What is the character of the yogi? How does the yogi behave? What is the yogi like? He then goes on to explain how the yogi meditates. And having explained how the yogi meditates, he explains the state that the yogi eventually attains. When Arjuna explains that the path that is explained about Dhyan Yoga is too difficult for him, implying, of course, that it is too difficult for the common man, Krishna says that it is possible through practice, constant practice, and through detachment. And when he fears that taking up such a path will lead to being neither here nor there, losing out materially and spiritually, Krishna clearly explains what happens to someone who is yoga brushed, or someone who takes up the path of yoga and ultimately has to give it up, and how rebirth will help him to continue it. So thus the Krishna explains that the yogi, the Dhyan yogi, is superior to the Jnana yogi, he is superior to the Karma yogi, the one who performs rituals of the Vedic system. And he advises Krishna to engage in Dhyan Yoga. But in the last verse, he concludes by saying that of all forms of yoga, of all the yogis, the supreme, the topmost yogi is one who is engaged with me in devotion, implying that even higher than that is to do with bhakti or parabhakti, which he will later discuss. So, in the 12th chapter, 12th verse, Krishna explains to Arjun the hierarchy, where he says, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasaj, jnanad dhyanam vishishyate, dhyanad sarva karma phala tyagas, tyagat shantir anantaram. So he says, higher than ritual is engaging in spiritual knowledge. Higher than engaging in spiritual knowledge, he says, is being absorbed in meditation. And he says, even better than being absorbed in meditation is to be engaged in performing your duty in a spirit of devotion and renunciation. For such a renunciation gives you everlasting peace. So, Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita essentially point out that doing one's work in a spirit of renunciation and duty is the highest. If we see in the philosophy that has been laid down by Aldous Huxley in his perennial philosophies, he points out that when you pray to God for something, for yourself, then that prayer is called petition. When you pray to God to do something for someone else, it may be your wife, your child, your friend, your neighbor, someone you know or don't know. But when you pray to God to do something for someone else, that is called intercession. When you pray to God without asking God for anything, simply in contemplation, then that contemplation, that is called contemplation or meditation. And that is what Dhyan Yoga is about. But even there, he points out that the highest form of prayer is called adoration. And adoration means one who works in a spirit of devotion and offers all his actions to God. So when you perform action, when you perform your duty and offer it to God, that action is called adoration. And that is the form which is most highly recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. The 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita begins very simply by affirming the importance of work, by affirming the importance of doing one's duty. And therefore, Krishna points out In the first verse of the 6th chapter, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Lord said, Anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyah. One who works as he is obligated, performing his duties without attachment to the fruits of his work. He is the true yogi, he is the true mystic, not one who lights no fire and does no work. So right in the beginning, when he's talking about Sankhya, about Dhyan Yoga, Krishna states that the person who is the sannyasi, the person who is the yogi, is not one who lights no fire and does no work, who doesn't perform any duties in the world, but one who performs all his social obligations, who performs all his duties and work without desiring the fruits of his labor. Such a person is the true yogi, such a person is a true sannyasi, not those who claim to be doing only that and do no work. Then Krishna goes on to further clarify that you cannot become a yogi until you have given up all desire for yourself. Yam sannyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava nahi asanyashta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschanah. So Krishna explains that what is called renunciation is the same as yoga or linking up with the Supreme Lord. Because by linking up with the Supreme Lord, it results in renunciation of the world, at least mentally, if not physically. And he says that no one can become a yogi until he renounces the desire for enjoying the self within the world. So as long as you have desires within the world, sankalpa, you have to get rid of them. Nahi asanyashta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschanah. You have to give up these desires of the world. And when you have abandoned all desires of the world and you're working in a spirit of renunciation and devotion to God, being absorbed in Him, forgetfulness of self, that Krishna points out is being a yogi. Now, Krishna also points out that in the system of Dhyan Yoga, Krishna points out that in the system of Dhyan Yoga, you first need purification. Without purification, you can't take it up. And that purification is only possible through working in the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation. And having purified yourself through knowledge and work with devotion and renunciation, both of which are the two wings of the bird, having purified yourself, then you may be qualified for engaging in meditation. So Krishna says, Aru ruksher muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yogarudas tasyeva samaha karanam uchyate. For one who is a newcomer on the path of purification, of yoga, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to that purification, then he says, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So this is very important, that without having initially purified yourself through the process of knowledge and work in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, you cannot quieten your mind. And without quietening your mind is not fit for meditation. It is very important to understand that a quiet mind automatically, spontaneously, effortlessly goes into meditation. But a person whose mind is agitated, whose mind is disturbed, whose mind is full of desires, whose mind is full of anxieties, whose mind is full of aspirations for the world, full of ambitions, such a person, his mind can never be brought to meditate. Therefore, first purify yourself. That purification takes place through working in a spirit of renunciation and devotion, through remembering God and forgetting self, through the path of spiritual knowledge which is attained through performance of yajna. And when your mind is completely purified, spontaneously, effortlessly, naturally, easily, you will enter into meditation. So he says, Aru Rukshor Munar Yogam Karma Karanam Uchyate Yoga Rudastasya Samaha Karanam Uchyate. Thus, having worked in the world to silence your mind, please remember what I have said, that it is hard work to silence the mind, but hard work silences the mind. Especially when you do hard work in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, then your hard work silences your mind. And when your mind is silent, automatically, spontaneously, easily, it enters into meditation. Whereas if your mind is not purified, meditation is next to impossible for any individual. So Krishna explains to Arjuna that this person who is becoming prepared for engaging in Dhyan Yoga is a person who has renounced all material desires. None of his actions are for sense gratification or enjoyment. None of his activities are for power and control and possession. None of his activities are to prove that he is superior to anybody else. And none of his activities are engaged towards acquiring any fruitive activities. I pointed out to you earlier that there are three diseases of the mind which arise from the root of the ahankar or the self. The first is to enjoy and expand enjoyment. The second is to increase power and control and possession of things of the world and people of the world. And lastly, the third desire, which is constantly there, is the desire to show that you are better than other people. So Krishna says that if you want to cross over these hurdles of enjoyment, power, control, possession, and being better than the other, Krishna says, recognize that I, the Supreme Lord, is the only enjoyer, that I, the Supreme Lord, am the only controller and possessor, and that I, Krishna, is the equal friend of all living entities, no matter what you think you may have done. Bhoktaram yagna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam yajñatva mam shantim richiti. And such a person who has attained peace, yada hi na indriyartheshu na karmasva anusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudastaduchyate. So such a person who has no more desires for enjoyment, possession, control, proving himself better than others, who is free from the desire for performing actions to get something in return or fruit, whether it is enjoyment in work, which is of the mind, whether it is intellectual progress or learning, which is another form of fruit, and the acquisition of name and fame, which is fruit for the ego. And whether you want fruit for your physical body, which is earning money, when you have given up the desire for all of these, then you can say that such a person is ready and prepared to bring about the process, to begin the process of Dhyan Yoga. So Krishna points out that a person must elevate himself by his mind, not degrade himself, because the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Udhared atman atmanam na atmanam avasadyet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmana. Now this is very important, that the word atman means many things. In fact, there is a whole book written on this by a scholar who follows the word atman from the earliest of the Upanishads to the most recent. And atman has been pointed out to mean even breath. It means the body, it means the mind, it means the soul. So here, the definition, the meaning of Atman, which is taken in context, is mind. And therefore, Udhared Atman Atmanam means one should deliver oneself by your mind. Never try to degrade yourself. Na Atmanam avasadyet. Atmaiva hi Atmano bandhur. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul. It is his enemy as well. And how is it his friend and how is it his enemy? Krishna points out in 6.6. Bandhur atmanas atmana atmastasya yenatmaiva atmana jitah anatmanas tu shatrutve vartet atmaiva tu shatruvat. It's very simple. The process of yoga is to conquer the mind. If you have conquered your mind which obeys you is your best friend. But the same mind, if it doesn't obey you, in fact, makes you obey itself, the mind is your master, then that mind will be your worst enemy. So when your mind is quiet, when your mind is silent, when your mind is trained, when your mind is controlled, you can instruct your mind to do anything. But if your mind is uncontrolled, if your mind is undisciplined, if your mind is wild, running riot, full of desires to control and possess, full of desires to enjoy and expand enjoyment, full of desire to show that you're better than the next person, your mind will be your worst enemy. It will take you to hell. So Krishna explains that for one who has conquered his mind, God is already reached. For one who has conquered his mind, God is already reached. For such a person, heat and cold, joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, happiness and distress, all of them are the same. So Krishna says, Jitatmana prashantasya paramatmaha samahitaha sitoshana sukhadukheshu tatha manapmanayo. If you have conquered the mind, your Paramatma, the Lord, is already reached. You have reached and attained the silent mind. And for such a person, happiness and distress, heat and cold, joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, all of them are completely the same. You are free from reactive emotion. And this freedom from reactive emotion, satisfaction as the result of having silenced your mind and having controlled it completely, is seen in two stages. The first stage is that you see everything material in the world, pebbles, stones, gold, you look at them with equal vision. And the next level of being controlled in your mind is when you regard all of them, your well-wisher, your friend, your enemy, the envious, the pious, the sinner, those who are indifferent and impartial, all of them you look upon with equal vision. So Krishna points out, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutasto Vijatindriya Yukta iti Uchyate Yogi Samaloshtrashma Kanchanaha. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence. He is self-controlled. He sees everything, pebbles, stones, and gold with equal vision. Surin mitrarya udasina madhyastha dvesha bandhushu sadhushva picha papeshu sama buddhir vishishyate. The person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, those who are indifferent and impartial. He looks upon all of them with equal mind. So the nature of the yogi, who is the yogi? The yogi is one who has silenced his mind. He has silenced his mind through the process of working in the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, who has silenced his desires for enjoyment, control, and possession of things in the world, who has silenced his desires to be better than other people, whether materially or spiritually. And when he has abandoned all of these, when he has become purified, when he has completely reached that stage of purification, when he is ready and prepared to sit in meditation, then Krishna says he begins to meditate. I will pause here because the next session I will conduct on what Krishna says about meditation and the answers that Krishna gives to Arjuna's questions. Today is a session on how to understand who is a yogi. A yogi is one who is united with God. How is one united with God? Detachment from the world and union with God are the same. Once you attain detachment from the world, you gain union with God. For one who is having union with God, he is automatically detached from the world. And when one has attained that state of becoming detached from the world, having attained union with God, when he has given up all desires to enjoy, to control, to possess, to be better than the next person, then such an individual who has controlled his mind, whose mind obeys him, one who is not a victim of his mind, such a person who looks upon the world and its material objects, whether they are rocks or gold, with the same vision, who looks upon enemies and friends, envious, the pious, sinner and saint, who looks upon all of them with equal vision. Such a person is the true yogi, and such a person is qualified for meditation. So with this, I will pause. If you have any questions on this subject, I will be happy to take them up.
Yes, of course. Good morning, Dr. Shantanu, and welcome all who's watching
Can't
the.
hear you.
Can you hear me now?
A little better, but not perfectly.
Okay, I'll try and speak louder. Is it better now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay. So, Dr. Shantanu, in this entire session, you spoke a lot about quietening the mind, quietening the mind, which is full of anxiety and worry. How does, someone who is going through, it could be a personal crisis because we are in the midst of very tough times. It could be a personal crisis. It could be a financial crisis. It could be anything really right now. So, how does one really start? Where should be the starting point? You've mentioned a couple of pointers during the session also, but for a layman to start off, quietening the mind, how does really, where does one really start off with?
The best way to quieten the mind is to perform all your duties in a spirit of renunciation and devotion to God, with the attitude Om Tat Sat, that Krishna, this is offered unto you. And when you do that, you are gradually diminishing, attenuating, transcending, surrendering, and even extinguishing this sense of self, which is the cause of all your suffering. And when you are performing all actions, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything you're doing for God, in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, you will find that as your attachment to God grows, your detachment from the world also increases. And as you remember God and forget self, you will progressively find yourself becoming free from suffering and misery.
Right.
And that is where you make a start. You make a start where you are standing right now. And where you are standing right now, with your job, with your profession, with your duties, when you engage in doing all of these in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, as you add value to the world, remembering God as an offering, all your activities, you're adding value to the world. And without expecting anything for self, you will begin and progress towards that state.
Right. Thank you. Another question we have, Dr. Nagarkatti, is that can past karmas be destroyed by sadhana or tapasya?
Past karmas are destroyed by realizing your spiritual identity. As long as you think you are Prakriti, as long as you think you are this body, mind, intelligence, and ego, so long you are bound by karmas. As you remember God and forget self, as you realize your spiritual identity, you become free from all your karmas, because your karmas are not yours. They are all part of Prakriti. And as you absorb yourself in God, as you forget and disentangle yourself from ahankar and prakriti, you will disentangle yourself from all your karmas as well. So to become free from karma, you have to become free from prakriti. You have to become free from the concept that you are I, me, myself, mine. Get yourself free from those ideas. Free yourself from this autobiographical, historical story you carry around in your mind about yourself. And indeed, be absorbed in God and forget self. Just do your duties that have been allocated to you as you are and while you are limited to this body. And as you do that, your subtle body will become attenuated, it will become extinguished, it will become surrendered, it will become transcended. And with that, the subtle body extinguishing, so also your karmas will also become extinguished.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. I'll read out this next question. Just give me 1 second. And the question is about chanting. Someone's asking us that can we chant Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva instead of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, as all are names of Krishna only? So, like a generic question is that can we change our mantras every day, and because it's all about in the end, remembering God.
See, the idea of changing your mantras every day is an idea of the mind. The mind which doesn't want to be disciplined will keep on trying to avoid whatever you impose upon the mind. So the mind will say, why this mantra? I'll do that mantra. And why I've done this mantra today, tomorrow I'll do another mantra. This is the classical attitude of the completely uncontrolled, idiotic mind. So you have to discipline your mind. And to discipline your mind, you have to select one mantra. If you want to chant any Krishna mantra and your Guru has given you such a Krishna mantra, then that's fine. There's no problem with that. But for those of you who have yet not been granted a mantra by some teacher of yours, some realized teacher of yours, please understand that for Kali Yuga, the Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Iti Shodhashakam Nam Nam Kali Kalmashu Nashanam Nata Parataropaya Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. For the age of Kali Yuga, you need to have this mantra for Kali Yuga, which is the mantra which I have just recited for you. So just like when you are in the 12th standard, you cannot read 10th standard books. Just like when you are in the 10th standard, 12th standard, you cannot read books that are for your BSc. Similarly, when you are in the Kali Yuga, you have to chant the mantra that is meant for Kali Yuga. And for that, you must chant the mantra in the Kali Santarana Upanishad.
Right.
Otherwise, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has clearly declared, Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti Tatrar Pita Niyamite Smaranena Kala Etadrashi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaivam Idrisham Ihajani Nanuraga. That, O Lord, you have put your transcendental potencies in every one of your names. And you have hundreds and thousands and millions of names. Unfortunately, I am not attracted to any one. So while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that there are millions of names of God, right? He implies that you have to chant one name of God or one mantra of God. The jumping from mantra to mantra is the monkey mind, which cannot stick to anything. Yes?
Yes, right. We'll take another question. Sir, how to practice abhyas practice along with vairagya detachment? That's the question we have.
How to practice? That we will do in the next session.
Okay.
Next session, we will discuss what Krishna says about meditation and what Krishna says about abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagriyate. That is the next topic we will be covering.
Another question, Dr. Shantanu, is that can regular, mortal human beings be yogis along with their, household responsibilities? Can they fulfill all the duties?
I can't understand what you're saying. Speak loudly, clearly, and slowly.
Okay. Dr. Shantanu, the question that I'm asking is that can regular mortal human beings become yogis along with their household responsibilities? Yogis, true yogis.
Yes,
along
they can.
with their household responsibilities.
Yes. All regular human beings can become yogis. And the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to direct every one of these regular human beings that they can become yogis and to teach them that path by which they can become yogis.
Another question that we have is reacting to provocation also the sign of an uncontrolled mind?
Absolutely. You need not react to provocation at all. And the controlled mind does not have reactive emotion. And therefore, whenever it is provoked, there is a pause and sometimes there is no response. Those who are engaged in fast thinking as opposed to slow thinking. Fast thinking is reflexive thinking. Fast thinking is the action of your karmas that are kicking in when you are provoked. Fast thinking is the result of a mind that is uncontrolled. But the mind that is controlled and silent, the mind which is silent so that consciousness can consider what is the best action, even if it is no action, that is the sign of a controlled mind.
And Dr. Shantanu, in continuation with that, can anyone really in particular, you've mentioned that a couple of times in the earlier sessions also, can sinners also really quieten the mind, and even children for that matter? Because children are also getting anxious these days.
Well, as far as sinners are concerned, sinners can certainly control their mind. Api chet sudracharo bhajate mam ananya bhakt sadhu reva samantavya samyak vyavasato hi saha. Shipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanahi name bhaktya pranashyati. Even if you performed abominable actions in the past, from the moment you begin this process, which has been laid down by Krishna, from that moment you should be addressed as sadhu. And very soon you shall become perfect. You shall become dharmatma. And Krishna says to Arjuna to declare it boldly that his devotee shall never perish. He also says, Api chedasi papebhyo sarvebhyo papakrittamah sarvam jnana plavaineva vrijinam santirishyasi. Even if you are the Nobel Prize winner amongst all sinners, the greatest sinner amongst all sinners, even then, seated on this boat of transcendental knowledge, you shall cross over this ocean of suffering. Yatha idhanso samido agni bhasmasat kurute Arjuna. Jnana agni dagda karmani bhasmasat kurute tatha. Just as firewood is converted into ashes by the fire, so also all your sins, all your karmas will be converted into ashes by this fire of knowledge. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam raja. Aham tam sarva papebhyo moksha ishami masuchaha. Abandon all other philosophies and varieties of religion. Follow what I am saying. Surrender unto me alone, and I will save you from all your sins, all your karmas. Never fear. Was that your question? What is the other question?
Children.
Yeah, children can also begin to chant, or children can also begin to pray. Children can also train their mind. So, in fact, it is childhood when you begin to implant these sanskaras. And if you do not implant sanskaras in your children when they are young, then watch out for them when they grow older, because they will make your living a living hell. But a child whose mind is controlled through chanting, through the performance of mantra, through the performance of prayer, acting with devotion, such a person, such a child, as he grows up with his controlled mind, will be productive. He will become your savior, and he will become your true putra, your true one who delivers you from the hell which is known as poo. It is said that from the urinary passage, semen comes. And when that semen produces a child who is brought up with his senses and mind controlled, such a person then performs religious ceremonies to deliver his parents from the hell which is known as poo, which is why he is called putra. Whereas a son who is growing up with or even a daughter who is growing up with an uncontrolled mind, but is completely disinclined towards religion, such a child is really not a putra, such a child is a mutra, but equivalent to the urine that you pass.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Shantanu. I think that were the questions we had this week. If you want to brief us about the next session and what you're going to talk about, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the next time I will be covering what Krishna says about how to engage in dhyan, and also what Krishna answers the questions of Arjun who finds it difficult to engage in dhyan. Okay, Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Thank you
Jai
so
Shri
much.
Krishna,
Look
Hari
forward.
Om.